views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Tonight we present the debate for the Democratic primary in the 79th Assembly District, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Concourse Village, Claremont, Crotona, Morrisania, West Farms, and others. This is our first Assembly debate of this election season, and it is for an open seat. The vacancy was created when the incumbent Michael Blake decided to run for Congress. Tonight's program is presented in conjunction with the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that advocates for informed and active participation in government and works to increase understanding of major public policy issues. Co-sponsors tonight are the Bronx Times and Schneppes Media. The primary is June 23rd, and all eligible voters are certainly urged to vote. There actually are 6 candidates on the ballot for the 79th, but unfortunately only 2 will be with us tonight. Dion Powell directly declined the opportunity to participate, and neither George Alvarez, Cynthia Cox, nor Eric Stevenson replied to any of our invitations to participate, which we regret. Certainly on BronxNet, we want to have as many candidates as possible, but we will proceed with 2 candidates tonight. Let's meet them: a social worker at a New York City public high school, a college professor and published author, Chantel Jackson. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
And the former director of a community school and an advocate community organizer, Elvis Santana. Mr. Santana, nice to have you with us.
No, thank you for having me.
Candidates in tonight's debate, we'll keep it simple. We have 2 candidates. I will direct the question to one candidate. That candidate will respond, and then we will have a free-flowing dialogue that each candidate can participate in, with the original respondent having the final say on the question before the next question is asked. Please remember, each candidate must be recognized before they speak, given the virtual technology. At the end of the program, each candidate will be given the opportunity to deliver a 1-minute closing statement. And please note that tonight's questions and topics include those submitted by the candidates themselves. Before we begin, I do want to mention, and I've mentioned this at the beginning of all our debates, and that's just a word of sympathy for the thousands of people who lost loved ones to the pandemic, and also to those who are not well and who were not well. We always wish a hearty get well soon. We certainly urge everybody in the Bronx, certainly in the 79th Assembly District and everywhere, to stay safe, be smart. Let's do the socially distant thing. Let's make sure, especially, that we wear our masks. And on that note, it's very difficult to ignore all that, but we do have business we have to do, and we're going to proceed. I know both candidates agree with me on that note of care for the people of the Bronx. So let's begin. The first question for you, Ms. Jackson. I'm sure both of you want to weigh in on this. Let's talk about experience. What in your experience makes you believe that you are the best candidate for the 79th Assembly District?
Sure. Gary, thank you. Thank you to BronxNet and to Elvis, to the League of Women Voters, for even allowing me the platform to speak. And what makes me the best candidate is that I come with experience. I was a teen mom, so I had my daughter when I was 18 years old. I was on almost every form of public assistance. I had my ex-husband who went to jail on drug laws, and I raised my daughter by myself for 4 years. Through all of that, I was still able to earn a college degree, become a licensed social worker, own my own home here in the Bronx through all of that adversity. And so what makes me the best candidate is that I have the experience of the people in my community. And so I'm going to give them a voice in Albany. I'm going to speak for all the mothers and the social workers, the people who had to deal with family members that were on Rikers Island, and so on and so forth. So my experience, me being a woman of color, me being a mom, makes me the best candidate for the 79th Assembly District.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santana.
Yeah, I gotta say that growing up in the South Bronx, I grew up with an array of challenges myself. Since I was a child, having to grow up in one of the poorest congressional districts, being involved in organizations and actually helping nonprofits to help communities, especially of ours of color, was my bedrock of actually growing the experience that makes me the most qualified. It started off as being a person who benefited from community board organizations and nonprofits that gave back to communities. I managed to then work with them and help those at risk, those at most vulnerable youth, to make sure that they get jobs, that they make sure they get the right training. But then I took it a bit step further. After that, I managed to work in schools to be able to help improve the educational system, but in collaboration with community board organizations that offer more opportunities. After that, I decided to take more of an advocacy approach. I was able to advocate for tenant rights laws like the rights to counsel, which gives those who are not funded or have enough income to pay for a landlord. We passed that. I was testifying that in court in City Hall to pass the rights to counsel, but also holding other landlords accountable, like the Housing Rights to Not Warehousing Act, and also help pass other bills related to environment, such as the Waste Equity Bill, where it has the Bronx take its fair share of garbage opposed to more than what it deserves. So just those advocacy and every other experience of putting myself in shoes of those who need it the most, I think, and I know for a fact, that I am the best qualified candidate to help represent all parts of this district.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson, according to our guidelines, you can have the final word on that.
Yeah, I want to thank Elvis for his work as well in the community. And regardless of who wins in this election, we all have to work together. So I'm grateful to hear all the things that he has accomplished. And I just want everyone to know that my work goes unnoticed, because we have multiple community leaders who have backed me, endorsed me, and supported me, because they know that I've been working in schools with young people from the beginning. I've helped over thousands and thousands of students get into college, low-income first-generation students get into college, so that they can also help improve their community.
Thank you very much. Mr. Santana, this is for you. It's a wide-ranging question. I mean, you just have to open up your window and look and see what's going on outside. I think we can all get a pretty good sense of it, and it has many, many tentacles. So I'll ask it this way. While many in the Bronx support the Black Lives Matter protests and have gathered and marched in the name of social justice, the agenda has been marred by significant destruction of small business districts throughout the heart of the Bronx, and also by violence from the police, and frankly, violence in the other direction toward the police. So if you are an assembly member, I guess, what do we do to rebuild our business districts? And maybe more importantly, what do we do to close the gap between the communities and their police force? And then, of course, in the other direction, make sure that people feel comfortable and feel protected by the police force without feeling oppressed, as well as the myriad of social justice issues. There you go, Mr. Future Assemblyman. Yeah. I'm going to lay it on the table. What do you do? And then,
it's not something that it's new. People of the community, especially, and Chantel could always jump in anytime, but it's something that we're not just realizing is just happening. It's been happening 50s, 60s, and some say that it was finished, and it's not. I mean, what happened to Eric Garner, for instance, Staten Island, was one of the biggest things. We've seen, for instance, when we relied on leadership to take action, and it wasn't until last year when Mayor was in a presidential debate, and there was a rally asking him what they do to the officer who actually who was the cause of the Eric Garner death. And it wasn't until he said in that debate that within the next 30 days or so, he will then take action, and he was blaming the DOJ. You know, leadership like that is something that throughout states like New York is something that we cannot continue to enable. So having to repeal 50A would be the biggest change for New York State. I mean, even then in the Eric Gardner case, the NYPD used 50A consistently in order to hide what's happened and misconduct in police behavior. That's something that the leadership now and state legislature need to be able to not amend, not tweak, but repeal. Having to support O'Donnell's and Bailey's bill is something that New York State itself could say, this state alone is a change that the country should be able to use as an example. And it's just unfortunate that people in our community today, yesterday, these past few days, are ignoring the fact that, yes, there is institutionalized racism in this country, especially for the state here, especially for the lowest congressional district here and a poor community. Yes, it still happens. So for me personally, I've worked with precincts, worked with commanding officers that has designated friendly officers to engage more in the community. What I want to do, hopefully, if 50A is repealed within these next weeks or so, when state legislators come back to session, is to get them more involved in the community. Have to defund NYPD and give those money to the community so they can thrive in that and use that more. That's what I want to be able to do in the state legislature.
Sounds like just to redefine it, reapportion some of the funding, right? That's one of the things on your list. Ms. Jackson, for you?
Absolutely. So you started off asking about our small businesses, and I just want to shine a light on what I have been doing in our community. And so I've been working with Michael Brady from the Third Avenue bid, and he's one of the experts, and those business owners are the experts. And so they are going to assist us in strategies to reopening. I think that it's important for us to shine a light on the work that they have been doing with helping businesses get the PPP loans. And so my best strategy would to be rely on the experts who are already in this fight. And I want everyone to know that I have been at the forefront of these protests, requiring, mandating, and fighting for our police to stop brutalizing our Black men and women. I just want to say thank you to Local 371, one of the many unions who have endorsed me for posting on their social media what we can do. And what we can do to combat police brutality is, like Elvis mentioned, we can repeal 50A so that officers' misconduct is not shielded from concerned citizens. We can ban racial profiling by police with Bill A4615. We can pass the Police Statistics and Transparency Police Stat Act, which requires data collection and reporting on law enforcement, as well as deaths in police custody. We need to divest in policing and invest in communities. There's a host of bills we can pass to make sure Black and brown people are safe from the people that are supposed to keep them safe.
Mr. Santana, you can have the final word, and I'm actually going to make the next question an extension of this, but go ahead, Mr. Santana.
No, of course. I agree with everything she said, and the stat was an important thing. Data shows, and it's been proven that if you're data-driven, the numbers won't lie. I would like to agree with everything she said, and thank you for having to be out there protesting. We're in solidarity, and if anyone that is Dominican or within the Hispanic community, if Afro-Latino, you are part of this community as well. Just because of where your ethnicity is, Dominicans come from a background of Blacks. You be able to step forward and have to join in this fight is something that everyone that's watching should be able to say that I am part of this movement.
Thank you very much. You know, in football, there's a thing called piling on. And from what businesses have been through during the pandemic, and they've had to close, and many didn't know if they could be reopened. This particular circumstance, and listen, we know Fordham Road, Bernstein, and other places, businesses, not only were they closed, now that many of them were literally physically destroyed. So I guess the question is that this is going to be a hard rebuilding process, and not only from the pandemic and the unemployment that is now at record levels, but the storefronts that were once filled were looted, and they're going to need to be rebuilt. With state funding also decimated, financial help is going to have to come from the federal government. But what can the state do to really help these businesses get back and certainly create a sense of vitality in our business districts? Once the dust clears, frankly, I don't know what we're going to find and how we're going to revitalize our economy in the borough of the Bronx. increase employment, etc. So Ms. Jackson, that's for you.
Yeah, of course. So I just want to be clear on what I have been working on here in the district. So while there was destruction that happened to businesses on Fordham, we organized a cleanup of Fordham. Uh, I was out there at 9 a.m. making sure that I cleaned up my community. Now, that's not necessarily in my district, but it is my home. I utilize Fordham just like any other Bronxite. So I was out there for the cleanup, and then we got word that Third Avenue, which is not in my district either, but I also utilized, we thought Third Avenue would get hit really bad, and it didn't face the same experience that Fordham did, but I was a part of that cleanup as well. News 12 covered that. So what I want to be clear on is that we need to just be out there doing the work. We can talk about like how looting is bad and things like that, but I don't want to change the conversation. What is bad is Black lives being lost to police brutality. And people are tired. They're sick and tired, and they're willing to do any and everything to get attention. And also in the Bronx, we are facing the highest unemployment rate. And so people, there are not people like myself out there looting. There are people who are desperate, who don't have much, and they are sick and tired. So those are the people who may be taking things out of stores, right? And so I think it's for us to revitalize or get back to where we were, or to take us a step further. We are demanding of the federal government to give us back the money in which we've already paid out to them. We need help from the federal government. We cannot do this alone. And so we are urging for the same dollars that New Yorkers have been paying out to the federal government, for it to give us back so we can get some relief here in the state. We also are asking our governor, and most of the New Yorkers here are asking our governor to pass a wealth tax so that we can create new revenue here in New York. And so with those things, we can make sure that we are looking out for the small mom and pop stores, but also the community at large. We want the money in which we paid out to the federal government to come and give us some relief here in New York. And we're also asking for our governor to take a stand and pass the wealth tax.
Mr. Santana?
Yeah, of course. The way that a lot of people are going to perceive the next few months is still blurry. Having to revitalize an economy, especially for the Bronx, where there are businesses that are owned, mom and pop shops, you have to ask yourself, where can the money come from? And so you have different options. And they were introduced a long time ago. Increasing the tax brackets for those making 5, 10, 50, $100 million annually in New York State, having to pass a tier tax, luxury homes, where those who have second luxury homes, they're being taxed. Having to legalize marijuana and invest in businesses like that so that we can be able to tax and also bring that money to the communities. There are numerous amounts of ways where the governor is able to make a shift, where taxing, we're getting involved of those who are well off and won't be as affected because the COVID-19 outbreak, those within the Manhattan area, that alone should be a start. Of course, urging the governor to continue the fight, or at least fight harder to request those money for the state. The Bronx needs more funding, and that's something that throughout the entire time that we've witnessed before the pandemic, it's still there. If anything, it puts us a step back from where we were trying to grow out from. And that's something that
I want to interrupt you just because we're running out of time. I want to shorten some of the answers. I guess, Ms. Jackson, you get the final word on that, and then we're going to move on. And let's try to keep our answers a little shorter because it's hard to believe, but the clock does run. Go ahead.
Sure. No, I think that this is getting easier because Elvis and I share like a similar thought when it comes to how we can revitalize our own community. And I just want to add that, yeah, we want our funding to come back into our community, and we want it to go to summer youth programs. We want it to go to our businesses, and we want it to go towards our healthcare here in the Bronx.
Thank you very much. I do want to ask Mr. Santana, there was a question raised about your residency, and you might want to address that. You were accused of not living in the district and being part of it, so let's just address that right
Yes,
up.
sure. I can address it, and I can tell you for a fact that the origin of that accusation comes from a group of conservatives that don't share the same ideals of those candidates or actual like Chantel and I who are running in this district. And I can be open and minded and say that that base is the Ruben Diaz team. And them alone have no respect in terms of factual information. I've lived in the Bronx my whole life. My resume shows it. To be honest with you, because I was working as a director, went from one job to another, I couldn't risk my family having to lose their Section 8. So I had to be able to move, and I did move. Now, if it comes down to it, that is something I'm able to prove, but that case in trying to kick me off the ballot failed, along with this comment that they're trying to do. So,
Great. Ms. Jackson, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the piece about Elvis possibly not living in the district, and he mentioned like the Diaz team, which includes George Alvarez, which is one of our opponents. And I'm not surprised if it came out of that camp. If he lives in the district, I hope so, because we want to make sure that our elections are fair. And I ask that, you know, whatever proof you have to provide to the people, that it make sure that it's well known.
Okay. Did you want to respond, Mr. Santana, or do you feel like it?
No, of course. And with the honesty of the voters, I welcome any kind of comment, and we're able to address it. But as Chantel said, we're open, and if it does come down to it, I'm pretty sure that the information will surface and we'll be able to provide proof. But there's no need.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, you had posted that vaccinations of a child should be a parent's choice, not the state. Also, we believe in democracy. Requiring children to be vaccinated in order to attend school is more like a dictatorship. Why don't you address those comments? There are many people, certainly in the state assembly, who you're going to come up, if you are elected, you'll come up with loggerheads because they don't agree with that. So what are your thoughts on those comments, and do you stand by them?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I want to start by saying that I'm not anti-vaccination, even though that's what was posted and that was the headline, anything for clicks, right? I'm not anti-vaccinations. I've violated my own child's HIPAA law, agreement by state letting people know that my child is vaccinated. I am vaccinated. I am not against vaccinations. I am against the state mandating without giving informed consent. Parents should be well aware of what's in vaccinations, the side effects, and then be able to say yes and no to their child being vaccinated. So that's what I'm asking for. And it was specifically for the HPV vaccination, which is a vaccination against sexual intercourse. I didn't agree that 11-year-olds and 9-year-olds should be mandated to take a sex vaccination, right? Especially if they were not having sex. And the parent should be well informed and give consent before this happens. No one who's not a parent should be able to tell me as a parent what I should do with my child, right? Without giving me all the information before so. And as you can see, I'm getting very passionate about it because I'm a mom, and I'm hoping that the people who are for mandating the state to be parents as well, so that they can make these clear decisions for their child.
Mr. Santana.
Yeah, I am in support of Senator Holman's bill. One of the things that we're witnessing now is the outbreak of the COVID. Consent is needed. Information being provided to parents is needed. Schools are thinking about their staffs. They're thinking about other students. Having HPV in this terms of having to ask if whether or not making it mandatory, a parent should be able to argue and say no or yes, but the school themselves should be able to be more cautious, especially in this time, if whether or not they should allow a student in if they're not vaccinated.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson, you get the final word, and then we'll do one more question.
Yeah, I just want to say that children, when you mandate something, it's not across the board. And so some children were being vaccinated without their parent being informed, coming home with a letter saying that this is what happened at school. And that should never be the case. And so we want to make sure that people are informed and they give consent.
I want to, we'll make it the final question for, you can start, Mr. Santana, and I'll put housing, as we needed 2 hours for housing alone. But let's talk about the development of affordable housing, which of course is a major crisis across the city. We'll give each of you 1 minute on this. There are issues with NYCHA, which in many ways are a federal issue, but talk to me about your perception on how to make more affordable housing in the 79th. We'll give you each a minute, and then we'll do closing statements. Mr. Santana?
Thank you. So the housing particularly is, for me, pretty sentimental. There was on Prospect Avenue, not so far from where I live, there was a residence, St. Regis, that was owned, I forgot by the landlord, but he was on the top 10 list on Letitia James when she was public advocate on one of the worst landlords in New York State. I was able to advocate and help members, residents within that building to remove the ownership of that building away from the landlord. And then, of course, after that, it was having to help pass the Rights to Counsel, Housing Our Warehousing Act, to help and to penalize those landlords who are keeping units vacant and penalizing that because of the growing homeless crisis that we're having in New York State. And so of course,
got about another 15 seconds.
Yes, of course, I want to be able to support the Good Cause Eviction Bill. I want to be able to help pass HSS if introduced. I want to be able to help more homes guarantee for those within the federal level.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson, same question.
Yeah, housing is a part of my platform. I have heard too many horror stories of people who live in my community in NYCHA development. And it's really tough and devastating that we have to fight so hard just for the basic necessities of life, like running water. During the pandemic, Andrew Jackson houses had their water cut off. And so we had to advocate and fight just for that, for them to have their water cut back on. When it comes to affordable housing, I like I mentioned earlier, own my home through the Mitchell-Lama program. I would love to see the Mitchell-Lama program expand and actually work more efficiently because this is a great way for young people to own a home that is affordable for them. And so it's important that we shine some light on the Mitchell-Lama program, which is one that I would love to be a part of when I join the State Assembly.
Thank you very much. We have come to the time in our program where we will do closing statements from each candidate. Each candidate has 1 minute. And by our prior order and agreement, Ms. Jackson, you will go first.
Wow, this was fast. I want to thank BronxNet and Elvis again for giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you to all the unions who have endorsed the campaign, DC 37, Local 372, Local 371, NYSA, UFT, the organizations Planned Parenthood, Citizen Action of New York, Eleanor's Legacy, the elected officials, my Assemblyman, Michael Blake, my State Senator, Luis Sepulveda, State Senator Gustavo Rivera, whose district overlaps the 79th, Assemblywoman Natalia Fernandez, State Committeewoman and friend Amanda Ferreras, and State Senator Brian Benjamin. I want to thank them all for endorsing me. I also want to thank the community leaders who I've had the pleasure of serving with, like Danny Barber, Reverend Bruce Rivera, Clyde Thompson, Eric Farmer, Linda Kemp, and Gwen Primus. I say thank you
15 seconds.
For believing in me. I will continue to advocate for vulnerable populations through wellness, housing, and education now. I want everyone to be safe, wear your mask, and be sure to vote June 23rd and complete your census.
Thank you very much. Mr. Santana.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to BronxNet. Thank you for everyone, especially you, Chantel. This race is tricky. You have new candidates that are surfacing, but in terms of my candidacy, you've known me. You were able to see the things that I've done these past few years. Having to have true reform in things that matter to our communities, like rights for tenants, for environmental justice, for educational system, having an uplift in terms of funding. In this time of crisis, you want someone that is able to lead, but is knowledgeable on the facts and is able to advocate on things that care for you and for the people around you. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Jim Owls Club. I'm proud to be endorsed by Stonewall, Democratic New York City, Bronx Progressive, who also endorsed AOC in her first run, and of course, the National Association of Social Workers in the chapter of New York.
15 seconds.
Yeah, these organizations back me, and I want to make sure that if anything, you'll be able to back me too on my issues. Vote early too, if you like, from 13th to the 21st, and the 23rd, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chantel Jackson and Elvis Santana, you have exhibited the absolute best of the democratic process. It is unfortunate that the other candidates don't see it that way, but we certainly appreciate your participation, both of you, for joining us this evening. I know you don't necessarily agree on everything, but I know you will all agree with me that every single eligible voter should vote on June 23rd. Please note the that voting can be done by absentee ballot. To get your ballot, you visit vote.nyc. Also, we want to thank our collaborators, the League of Women Voters. For more information, you can call the League at 212-725-3541. We thank our co-sponsors, the Bronx Times and Schnepp's Media as well. One more debate. This was the fourth of 5 weeks of debates on BronxNet television. That will be on June 15th. We'll hold a debate for the open assembly seat in the 85th Assembly District. And so we want to thank our candidates this evening. We thank our great producer, Helen Greenberg, our collaborators and co-sponsors. And make sure you vote, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.